Senator from Utah.
Madam President, I first want to respond to something that was said just a moment ago. It's not he and he alone that can solve it. Congress is, in fact, the policy-making body within the federal government. We are the law-making body within the federal government. We can make changes to the law, and we can't lose sight of that fact. Madam President, pursuant to Title 10 of the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, I have a discharge petition at the desk and move to discharge from the Senate Committee on Appropriations and Budget, H.R. 3, to rescind certain budget authority proposed to be rescinded in special messages transmitted to the Congress by the President on May 8, 2018.
Pursuant to Section 1017B of the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, there will now be up to 1 hour of debate on the motion to discharge, equally divided between the two leaders or their designees. Who yields time?
Madam President.
Tom.
Madam President, over the next 10 years, our national debt is set to balloon from $21.16 trillion today to more than $33.9 trillion in 2028. With interest rates set to increase, the payments on the debt will also likely double over the next 10 years as a percentage of total economic output. Consider for a moment the fact that we're paying a little more than $300 billion a year to service our debt. It's not that much more than we were paying a couple of decades ago, when our national debt was roughly 1/5, 1/6 of its current size. The only reason that our debt service payments are as low as they are today is because our interest rates are at all-time historic lows. Our Treasury yield rates are artificially, historically, aberrationally, severely low. The situation gets a lot worse if our artificially, historically low interest rates increase or start to return to their historical averages at a pace quicker than it has been projected, as is easily possible. For example, if interest rates were to return just to historical norms, I'm not talking about a rebound above the historical average, just a rebound to historical norms, taxpayers would soon be drowning in trillion-dollar annual interest payments just for the interest on our debt. That means just the difference between what we're paying on our debt service payment now and what we would be paying then, possibly just a few short years from now, is more than we spend on the Department of Defense. This is really frightening, and this is why it's such welcome news that there's some movement on this front. That's why it was such welcome news that on May 8th, President Trump sent to Congress a request to rescind $15.4 billion worth of extraneous spending. Now, this is something that Congress used to do all the time. This is something that in decades past would occur dozens, even scores of times during a single presidential administration. And it was a bipartisan matter, of course. Returning unused taxpayer money isn't just good government. In a republic, it should be expected. It should be the norm. In 1981, President Reagan and a divided Congress rescinded more than $15 billion in federal spending, and another $16 billion in 1985 and 1986. President Clinton made 3 rescission requests in 2000, totaling $128 million. Now we have the chance to take up the mantle again. President Trump's specific proposals draw back unused funds from expired programs, obsolete programs, and accounts that the Congressional Budget Office says are wildly, needlessly overfunded. In fact, according to CBO, none of the funds in the requested rescissions would alter current federal programs in any way. For instance, CBO has certified that the $7 billion CHIP rescission would not affect either outlays or the number of Americans with health insurance. And I should note that Congress has rescinded CHIP funding in every enacted labor HHS appropriations bill since 2011, more than $50 billion in total during that time period. The spending targeted for rescission is either expired or rendered unattainable by current eligibility requirements. This $15 billion is just sitting. It's unused. in agency accounts. So how does it help to cut spending if this money is just sitting there? This is the real sticking point, Madam President. For Congress, you see, has this cute little habit of paying for new spending by raiding these unused funds. It's a budgetary trick, a gimmick, if you will. The money may not be used this year, but it can be recycled into budget gimmicks in future years. Rescinding it now takes the $15 billion out of circulation for those kinds of shenanigans in the not-too-distant future. And of course, that's the real reason why it won't pass unanimously. Now, to its credit, the House of Representatives has stepped up. On June 7th, the House of Representatives passed its own $14.8 billion rescissions package. Now it's our chance. Now we have the opportunity to do the same. This is the Senate's chance to show the American people that we retain some modicum of attention, of seriousness, when it comes to the spending habits of the federal government, when it comes to fiscal restraint in Washington, D.C. Cutting spending that isn't actually going to be spent may not be a profile in courage, but it's at least a sign of a pulse. And in Washington, that's something. That's something important that we can and we should show today. It's a step toward fiscal responsibility and away from the cynicism and the waste that has turned this city into what's known as the swamp. In Congress, we face a lot of difficult decisions, gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching decisions, but this is not one of them. President Trump's request is as reasonable as can be imagined. $15 billion may be a drop in the bucket compared to $15 trillion or $21 trillion, but that's a reason to support this legislation, not to oppose it. Congress needs to restrain its atrophied muscles in preparation for the far larger tasks that lie ahead. If we do not find the will, if we can't somehow muster the willpower necessary to reduce federal spending ourselves now, long before the laws of mathematics and economics will force us to do so, we'll regret it. Because if we wait until those laws catch up with us, it'll be a whole lot more painful later than it will be if we start making more modest adjustments now. Every day that passes without action represents more of our national debt being thrown onto our children's backs. Another line item on the fiscal indictment that we are writing, however unwittingly or unknowingly, against ourselves. We have to change course. This bill provides us with a good chance to take one small step towards sanity. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of the motion to discharge.